Madison, you've always been selfish. Chloe is everything you'll never be. My father's voice slammed through the dining room like a hammer. Forks froze halfway to mouth's glasses, trembled against plates, and the warmth of candlelight suddenly felt like a spotlight burning only me. My mother gasped. My cousins looked down, and Chloe just smirked like she had been waiting her whole life for this moment. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I laughed sharp and bitter. Good, I said, cool and steady. Then she can pay her own bills from now on. The silence that followed was heavier than the snow outside. My father shoved back his chair, pointing at me like I was a stranger. And right there in the middle of my mother's 60th birthday, the night turned into something I would never forget. Before I tell you everything, let me know where you're watching from. Have you ever been erased at your own family's table? That night, I walked in promising myself I'd just survived dinner. But I didn't know yet I was about to start a war. When people ask me why I don't go home often, I usually shrug and say, work keeps me busy. That's easier than explaining the truth that I grew up learning how to disappear at my own dinner table. I was 9 years old when I first realized what it felt like to be erased. That night is still carved in my memory like a scar that never fades. I had just won first place in a citywide writing contest. My story wasn't much just a simple tale about a girl who rescued a stray dog, but to me, it was everything. The gym smelled like popcorn and sweat. The folding chairs screeched every time parents shifted, and when my name was called, my teacher hugged me and whispered, "You're special, Madison." I clung to those words like they were treasure all the way home. At dinner that night, I placed the cheap blue ribbon in the center of the table, waiting for the moment my father would finally look at me with the pride I had been starving for. My mom smiled softly, her tired hands still damp from washing dishes, and said, "That's wonderful, sweetheart." But before her voice could land, my dad turned to my younger sister. "Chloe," he said, his grin already wide, "why don't you sing that little church song you learned?" She was 6 years old, with her golden curls bouncing as she stood on her chair, belting out a clumsy hymn in a high-pitched voice. My father laughed, clapped, even wiped away a fake tear. My aunts joined in, clapping along. My cousins banged their forks against plates in rhythm. The entire dining room filled with applause. And my ribbon. It lay forgotten between the mashed potatoes and the gravy boat, its blue sheen dull under the harsh light. No one even touched it. That was the night I learned applause wasn't for me. Later, I lay in bed clutching that ribbon so tightly the edges dug into my palms. The house smelled faintly of detergent and leftover stew. Through the thin walls, I could still hear Chloe humming the tune everyone loved, and I whispered to myself, "At least Grandma sees me." My grandmother was the only one who looked past the noise. Her hands, soft but veined, smelled like lavender lotion as she pressed something cool into my palm one weekend, a silver necklace with a tiny star etched in the center. "This is yours, Madison," she told me, fastening it around my neck. "You are your own light. Even if they forget to see it, you shine." I wore it everywhere: school recitals, spelling bees, even to my first job interview years later at a diner with sticky vinyl booths. The pendant wasn't jewelry, it was armor. Proof that I wasn't invisible. "Of course," Dad scoffed. "That old trinket," he muttered. Chloe giggled and asked if I picked it up at a thrift shop. Every time their words cut, I pressed the star so hard it left little grooves in my skin. The sting reminded me I was still real. I didn't know then that this necklace would become more than comfort. Someday it would become the sharpest blade I held against them. The older I got, the sharper the pattern became. Chloe could stumble and still be showered in praise. I could run myself ragged and still be told it was never enough. High school made the difference crystal clear. When Chloe failed a math quiz, Dad patted her back and said, "Grades don't define you, sweetheart. You'll do better next time." That same week, I came home with straight A's. He glanced at my report card for less than 5 seconds before muttering, "Good. That's what we expect." Expected. Like my effort wasn't achievement, just duty. I learned to stop expecting celebration. By college, I was working part-time jobs just to keep myself afloat. Dad didn't notice, or maybe he just didn't care. He was too busy bragging about Chloe's potential. She had a voice teacher, a car borrowed from a cousin, and every bill covered. Meanwhile, I ate ramen in a dorm room that smelled like mildew, saving every dollar to prove I could stand on my own. But even when I graduated, landed a stable job in finance, and thought freedom was finally mine, the chains just tightened in a different way. Family fund, Dad called it, a joint account with his name and mine. Just to keep things simple, he said, sliding the paperwork toward me with that voice that always made disobedience feel like betrayal. I signed because at 22, I still thought saying no would collapse whatever fragile peace we had. At first, it seemed harmless, occasional bills, groceries, but then the withdrawals came regular like clockwork. Rent for Chloe's apartment, tuition checks, gas money, even cash advances with Dad's signature in the notes line. My salary became less mine and more theirs, and when I asked about it, Dad's eyes hardened. "Don't act selfish, Madison. Family comes first." I wanted to scream. Instead, I swallowed it. Like I always did. One winter evening still haunts me. Cleveland snow pressed against the windows, the street lamps outside flickering in the storm. I was home visiting, sitting at the kitchen table, balancing numbers on a legal pad, the radiator hissing like it might burst. Chloe was sprawled on the couch, giggling at some sitcom laugh track. Dad walked through the room, clapped her shoulder, and said, "She's going to be somebody." Then he turned to me without even slowing his stride. "Don't forget the utilities, Madison." As if that was all, I was someone to cover the bills. That night, lying awake in the childhood bedroom where posters still peeled on the walls, I stared at the ceiling and clutched the silver star pendant against my skin. Its edges bit into my palm, grounding me in the only truth I could hold on to. I was still here, even if they didn't see me. But trauma doesn't vanish. It waits. It burrows under your ribs, quiet but patient, until one spark sets it off. I didn't know then that the fractures carved in me since childhood, the forgotten ribbon, the necklace mocked, the account bled dry, were only cracks. And cracks don't stay silent forever. They were waiting to split wide open. And they did on the night of my mother's 60th birthday. The night of my mother's 60th birthday was supposed to be different. I told myself in the car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Just get through dinner, Madison. Don't ruin it for her. Snow fell in sheets across Cleveland, dusting the front steps of the old house. Inside the dining room glowed two bright chandeliers reflecting off the polished china. The smell of roasted turkey and garlic bread wrapped around me the second I stepped in, pulling me back into a childhood I no longer trusted. Madison Mom smiled, her lipstick too red, her eyes tired but hopeful. She looked beautiful that night, like she had decided to finally take up space, even if only for a few hours. I hugged her, kissed her cheek, and whispered, "Happy birthday, Mom." I meant it. The table was crowded. Uncles, cousins, neighbors squeezed into chairs that scraped the hardwood floor. The air was noisy with gossip laughter, the clinking of forks against glass. For a moment, I let myself imagine it could stay that way. But peace never lasted in our house. Dad cleared his throat halfway through dinner, his fork tapping rhythm against his plate. The chatter died instantly. That was the power he held. He didn't need to raise his voice to silence a room. I want to take a moment. He began puffing his chest to recognize someone truly extraordinary. My eyes darted to Mom. This was her night, wasn't it? But then his gaze shifted across the table. "To Chloe," he declared. Applause erupted as if on cue. Chloe tilted her head, pretending to blush while clearly basking in the glow. Dad listed her achievements like a press release, how she was managing classes, working part-time, showing real potential. I chewed slowly, forcing a smile that tasted like ash. I had heard this speech 100 times, word for word, and still every syllable pierced. Mom's eyes flicked toward me, apology etched in them, but she stayed silent. Everyone always did. Dad's words rolled on heavy and suffocating. "She's everything a father could want." The fork froze halfway to my lips. I wanted to disappear under the tablecloth, but then his gaze snapped to me sharp as a blade. "Madison," he said, "are you helping your sister enough?" The room stilled every set of eyes waiting. My stomach dropped. I opened my mouth, but before I could form an answer, he turned to Chloe. "Does she help you?" he asked. Chloe hesitated for only a beat, then smiled sweetly. "She does. But there's something I wanted to ask her." I already knew. My pulse quickened. "Go ahead," Dad encouraged, grinning like he'd orchestrated this moment. Chloe leaned forward, her voice soft but deliberate. "I've been thinking about getting a car. It would make things so much easier, classes, work, everything. I was hoping you could help me with that." The air left my lungs like I'd been punched. A car. The word hung in the air like smoke. I set my fork down carefully, my pulse hammering against my ribs. "A car," I repeated, my voice flat. Chloe nodded, eyes wide in a performance of innocence. "Yeah, just something reliable. Nothing fancy. It would help me keep up with school and work." I turned to Dad, searching his face for even a shred of reason. "If she needs a car, why don't you buy it for her?" The shift was instant. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed, and the noise of the room dissolved into silence. "You really can't do that for your own sister," he said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I already help her plenty. If she wants a car, that's on her." His fist slammed against the table, rattling the glasses. "Chloe has potential. She's going to be somebody great, but she won't get there without support. I've spent half my income making sure she has what she needs because she deserves it." His voice rose, echoing off the walls. "And you? You can't even do this one thing for her." Across the table, Chloe dropped her eyes to her plate, pretending to be embarrassed. The rest of the family sat frozen utensils, abandoned breaths held. Then he said it. The words I will never forget. "She's better than you, Madison. She always has been, and she always will be." The silence afterward pressed down like a physical weight. I could hear my mother's breath catch, could see my cousins shift in their chairs, unsure where to look. And me, I laughed. The sound sliced through the air, brittle and cold. "Good," I said evenly, meeting his glare. "Then maybe she can start paying for herself." The dining room collapsed into a vacuum. Dad's face turned crimson, veins bulging at his temples. In one violent motion, he shoved his chair back, the screech of wood against hardwood screaming louder than anyone dared to. "Get out!" he roared, finger stabbing toward the door. "If you want to be selfish, you don't belong here. Don't come back." For a moment, I just sat there, heartbeat loud in my ears. Everyone watched, no one moved. Not one hand reached out to stop him, not even Chloe. I rose slowly, pushing my chair back with deliberate calm. I turned to my mother, forcing a smile. "Happy birthday, Mom." Then I walked out, leaving behind the smell of roasted turkey, the heavy silence, and the family who had just erased me in front of everyone. I thought I had walked away with nothing. I didn't know yet I was about to take everything back. I spent that night upstairs in my old bedroom, sitting on the edge of the twin bed like I was 13 again. The wallpaper was peeling, the radiator clanked, and the muffled hum of laughter drifted up from the dining room below like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just been erased in front of everyone. My phone buzzed nonstop on the nightstand, Chloe's name flashing, then Dad's, then Mom's. I let them all go dark. The next morning, I drove back to my apartment in the city snow, still thick on the windshield. I hadn't slept. My chest felt hollow, like something had been scooped out. But beneath that emptiness, a new voice whispered, "Don't let this slide. Not this time." I made coffee, sat at my small kitchen table, and opened my laptop. For months, I had ignored the account Dad convinced me to set up with him, the so-called family fund. My salary had been pouring into it like water down a drain. When the numbers loaded, my stomach turned. Thousands gone. Tuition payments for Chloe, rent checks, grocery store charges in neighborhoods I didn't even live near, recurring withdrawals signed in Dad's name. I stared until the screen blurred. He hadn't just taken from me. He had been bleeding me dry for years. A bitter laugh escaped. "Selfish," I muttered to the empty apartment. "They've been living on my back." I transferred every remaining dollar into my personal account, and closed the joint one for good. One clean cut. My phone exploded minutes later, calls, texts, messages stacked like bricks. I muted them all and sat in the quiet sipping lukewarm coffee. For the first time in years, silence felt powerful. That afternoon, I called Jordan. We hadn't spoken in months, an old friend from college who now worked at a small law firm downtown. When he picked up, his voice was warm, familiar. Madison. Haven't heard from you in forever. Everything okay? I hesitated, then told him everything. Dad's demands, the humiliation at dinner, the account. My voice shook, but Jordan didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a pause. You know that's theft, right? He said quietly. If you wanted, you could press charges, or at least threaten to. The word theft clanged in my ears like a bell. I'd never dared to call it that. Family made it sound like duty. But Jordan stripped the mask clean off. I don't know, I admitted. Pressing charges against my own father, Madison, he cut in his tone sharper now. He's been stealing from you. Don't soften it. If you don't stand up, he'll never stop. After the call, I sat in the dim kitchen, the winter light casting long shadows across the table. My necklace, the silver star, caught a glint from the window. I reached for it, thumb brushing the etched lines. For years, it had been comfort. Tonight, it felt like a weapon. That was the first time I realized I wasn't powerless. And once you taste that thought, you can't go back. 2 days later, there was a knock on my apartment door. I almost didn't open it, but the soft voice on the other side made my chest ache. Madison, it's Mom. She stood there in her long winter coat, hair pinned back, eyes rimmed red like she hadn't slept. I let her in, wordless. She wandered the living room, her gaze snagging on the empty bookshelves where my TV and laptop had once been things Dad had borrowed weeks ago and never returned. Your father was angry, she said, finally perching on the edge of my couch, like she was afraid to settle. He didn't mean what he said. I let out a short laugh sharp as glass. Oh, he meant it. Every word. She winced, rubbed her hands together. You know how he gets. He wants what's best for Chloe. There it was again. Chloe. Always Chloe. Mom. I said, my voice flat. He told me to get out and never come back. And you're here asking me to fix it. Her shoulders slumped. For a moment, I thought she might cry. Instead, she whispered, If you just let this go, Madison. Make peace. Don't push him further. I stared at her, the old ache mixing with a new, colder steel. It's already worse, Mom. And I'm done pretending it isn't. She looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable in her eyes before standing and heading for the door. Don't do anything you'll regret, she said softly, and then she was gone. That night, restless, I pulled out the small jewelry box where I always kept my grandmother's necklace. The star pendant should have been there waiting solid. Instead, the velvet lining lay empty. My stomach dropped. I tore through drawers, through purses, through the nightstand. Nothing. Panic curdled into fury as a memory slammed back. Dad brushing past me in the hallway last week, his hand suspiciously tucked into his jacket pocket. No, I whispered. He didn't. But deep down, I knew he had. The next morning, I drove to the old house. Snow crunched under my boots as I marched up the steps. Mom opened the door, startled. I need to see Dad, I said. He was in the den, flipping through papers like a man too comfortable in his lies. On the desk beside him sat a pawn slip. My eyes caught the description. Silver necklace. Star pendant. My breath caught fire in my chest. You stole from me, I said, my voice shaking. He didn't even flinch. Don't be dramatic. It's for your sister. She needs the money. The room spun. My hands curled into fists. That necklace was mine. Grandma gave it to me. It's the only thing of hers I had left. He shrugged, leaning back in his chair, smug as ever. It was just gathering dust. Chloe can actually use the help. Something inside me hardened beyond repair. I realized in that moment my father would strip me of anything money memories, even the last gift of the one person who had ever truly seen me, just to keep Chloe shining. And that was the moment I stopped being his daughter. As I left the den, snowlight flooding the hallway, I touched the empty space at my collarbone where the necklace should have been, and I knew the next move was mine. The pawn slip burned in my pocket like a live coal. I hadn't confronted him the moment I found it. I'd walked out of the den before my rage could spill over, but I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. Silence had been my curse for too long. 2 nights later, Mom called. Her voice trembled through the receiver. "Your father wants everyone at the house. A family meeting." Family. The word tasted bitter. Still, I went. Not for him, not even for Chloe. For me. The living room was already crowded when I walked in. The house smelled like overcooked stew and cigarette smoke, the old carpet damp from boots dragging snow inside. My uncles sat stiff, whispering to their wives. Cousins scrolled nervously on their phones. Chloe curled small in the corner armchair, one hand resting protectively on her stomach like she was holding in a secret. Mom hovered by the fireplace, wringing her hands, her face pale with exhaustion. And Dad, Richard Cole, stood at the head of the room, posture straight chin high like a judge about to deliver a sentence. His voice filled the room before I had even sat down. "You've made this family unstable," he declared. "Pulling money-making scenes embarrassing us at your mother's birthday. That ends tonight. I didn't sit. I didn't even take off my coat." Snowflakes melted from my sleeves, dripping onto the rug. "Unstable," I echoed, my voice flat. "Funny. I thought stealing from your own daughter was the definition of unstable." Gasps rustled through the room like wind through dry leaves. One of my aunts set down her teacup too hard, the porcelain clink echoing. My father's jaw locked, his nostrils flaring. "Watch your mouth," he snapped. I pulled the pawn slip from my pocket and held it high, my hand steady even though my heart thundered. "You sold Grandma's necklace. The only thing she ever gave me. For Chloe." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Do you have any idea what that meant to me? You'd strip me of the last piece of her I had, just to keep Chloe above water." Dad's face turned a shade darker. "That necklace was worthless. To you, I cut him off, my voice rising. Not to me. Not to Grandma. She told me I was my own light when she gave it to me. You turned that into a pawn ticket." The silence afterward was suffocating. Even Chloe lifted her eyes, then wide and uncertain. From the corner, Ethan, my cousin, shifted. He looked at Dad, then at me like he was debating something. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Maybe you should tell her the rest." Dad's head whipped toward him. Quiet. But Ethan didn't back down. He leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly, knuckles white. "She has a right to know. About the house." Murmurs spread. My stomach knotted. What house? Ethan's gaze flickered toward me, apologetic. "Grandpa's place. He's been trying to put it on the market. Said the money would cover Chloe's situation." The words hit like a slap. Grandpa's house, the creaky old place with the oak tree we used to climb the porch swing, where Grandma read her Bible. It wasn't just property. It was our family's backbone, and Dad was ready to sell it behind closed doors. I turned slowly back to him. My voice was quiet, but every syllable cracked like ice. "You'd sell everything. The house, Grandma's memory, even my necklace. All to cover Chloe's mistakes." He slammed his fist against the coffee table so hard the glasses rattled. "I'm doing what's necessary. Family comes first." I took a step closer, snow still dripping from my coat, my breath steady. "No," I said. "Chloe comes first. Not family, not Mom, not me, just her." The room froze. Every pair of eyes darted between us like spectators at a prize fight no one wanted to admit they'd been waiting for. My mother whispered, "Richard, please," but he silenced her with a glare. Then he sneered, his voice low, dangerous. "You think you can stand against me, Madison. You'll never win." And for the first time in my life, I smiled at him. Cold, certain. We'll see. The room felt like a furnace. Everyone's faces lit by the glow of a fire that no longer warmed, only burned. My father's sneer cut through the silence. "You think you're clever waving around a pawn slip? You think that makes you powerful?" He leaned forward, voice low, venom dripping. "This family is mine to run. Always has been." I took a slow breath and pulled another paper from my bag. My hands didn't shake this time. Funny, because the bank statements say otherwise. I laid them flat on the table, the pages fluttering in the draft from the chimney. Rows of withdrawals, signatures, transfers all under his name. "You've been draining my paycheck for years," I said, my voice steady, "calling it family responsibility, but the law calls it something else." Aunt Marjorie gasped. One of my cousins muttered, "Jesus Christ." For a moment, Dad's face shifted anger, giving way to something smaller, less certain. Then he straightened, his voice booming. "That was money for Chloe." For her future, I didn't flinch. "No, Dad. That was theft, and I've spoken to a lawyer." The words dropped like stones. Ethan's eyes widened. My mother's lips parted, shock flickering across her face. "You wouldn't dare," Dad growled. I smiled, cold and sharp. I already did. The silence stretched tight as wire. Then a sound cut through, soft, almost inaudible. A sob. Everyone turned. Chloe's shoulders shook, her head bowed into her hands. For once, the mask slipped. "Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Stop!" His head snapped toward her. "What are you talking about?" Tears streamed down her face. "I can't keep pretending. Madison's been taking care of me for years. Rent, groceries, bills, she's been the one carrying me." "Not you." She looked up, eyes swollen. "You never helped me. You just pushed her too." The room imploded with murmurs. My chest tightened, not with pity, but with the strange weight of truth finally spoken aloud. Dad's face drained of color. "Chloe, don't," but she cut him off louder now, voice trembling but fierce. "She raised me, Dad. Not you. You just shouted and took." My mother pressed a hand to her mouth, tears brimming. For the first time, she looked at me not with apology, but with something closer to shame. I leaned forward, my words cold as ice. "You asked if I could stand against you. Here's your answer. I don't have to. Your own daughter just did it for me." His lips moved, searching for something to say, but nothing came. The man who had ruled every dinner table, silenced every voice, now stood mute in front of the people he once commanded. The crack in his armor was visible to everyone. And once people see a king bleed, he's no king anymore. I gathered the papers, slid them back into my bag. "This ends now," I said. "The money, the control, the humiliation. I'm done. If you try again, the lawyer files charges. Your choice." Then I turned and walked toward the door, my boots echoing against the hardwood. Behind me, the room erupted, Chloe crying openly, Mom begging for calm, uncles whispering. But the only sound that stayed with me was my father's silence. For the first time in my life, he had no words. And I knew the power had shifted. The night of the family meeting clung to me like smoke, but when I woke the next morning, something was different. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what my father might do. I'd seen him break speechless, stripped of power, and that image played over and over like a song I never wanted to end. Within a week, I listed my apartment for sale. By the end of the month, I had packed up what little remained: my books, my clothes, a few framed photos Grandma had taken. The pawn shop slip stayed folded in my wallet, not because I wanted the reminder, but because it was proof of the line he crossed, proof of why I couldn't go back. I moved to a small condo across town, far enough from Cleveland's gray suburbs that the air felt different. My new place was modest, bare walls, quiet hallways, a window that looked over a diner parking lot, but it was mine. Every box I unpacked felt like peeling off another layer of their hold on me. One evening, as I arranged the last stack of books, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Mom stood there, a paper envelope clutched in her hands. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. Inside the envelope was a stack of photocopied bank records, the same withdrawals I had already shown, but this time highlighted dates, circled initials noted in her handwriting. At the bottom, in shaky pen, she had written, "For you if you need it." I looked up at her. Her eyes glistened. "I can't say it out loud, but I'm sorry." She didn't stay long. When the door closed, I sat on the floor and cried, not for him, not even for Chloe, for her. For the years, she let silence be her survival. Maybe this was the closest she could come to breaking it. That night, I dug into the last box I had left sealed. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was my grandmother's necklace. Not the original, it was gone for good, but a replica Jordan had found for me online after I told him the story. I slipped it on the silver star cool against my skin, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. It wasn't Grandma's exact gift, but it was the symbol. The light she told me I carried, and I believed it again. 3 months passed before I heard their names again. My phone had been blissfully quiet, no more late-night demands, no more guilt-laced voicemails. Just silence. Peace. Then one evening, as I sipped coffee by my window, an email popped up. Subject line, "Hey, can we talk?" It was from Chloe. Her message spilled like desperation onto the screen. She was pregnant. The father had walked out. Dad's finances had collapsed after my withdrawals stopped. The old house hadn't sold. Buyers weren't biting. She had nothing left. Please, Madison. I know I've made mistakes, but I need your help. We're still family. Family. That word again, weaponized, bent out of shape. I stared at the email for a long time, tracing the silver star at my collarbone. I remembered her smirk at the birthday table, the way she let Dad's words slash me without protest. I remembered the pawn slip, the withdrawals, the silence of every relative who looked away, and then I clicked mark as spam. Some lessons aren't learned with kindness. Some people only change when the person they used to lean on finally steps aside. The next week, I walked through my new condo sun, spilling across the hardwood. A vase of fresh tulips glowed in the window. The necklace caught the light, scattering tiny stars on the wall. My chest loosened, a freedom I'd never known before settling into my bones. They thought erasing me would keep them strong, that I'd always bend, always carry, always cover the bill. But the truth, by walking away, I'd finally shown them what they'd lost, and I hadn't lost a thing. If your family kept taking from you while praising someone else, would you walk away, or would you fight back? If your family kept taking from you while praising someone else, would you walk away, or would you fight back? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. And if you've ever felt invisible at your own table, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss another story like this. From all of us at Flex Revenge Channel, thank you for watching, thank you for sharing, and thank you for being part of this community.